from Gerry Baker, the host of Wall Street Journal at Large. You can see it on this fine network, 7:30 tonight. Gerry, good to see you. It is interesting, right, that Vladimir Putin manages to keep doing his thing. And a lot has been made of the fact that maybe he's found ways around this, dating back to taking Crimea and working around sanctions that were in effect then. But he's in financially far better shape than I think most people would have assumed at this stage. What's going on?
Well, I think the simple reason, Neil, and thanks for having me again, is that the sanctions that we have imposed, which have been pretty stringent in some respects, have basically not blocked the most important source of Russian revenue, which is oil and gas revenue. The European Union acknowledged this week that since the invasion, the EU has spent nearly $40 billion in 6 weeks on Russian oil. It's passed about $1 billion of assistance to Ukraine.
So it's not cut off immediately. People make that assumption.
No, Russian oil and gas is still hugely important. They've said they plan to reduce their dependency and eliminate their dependency. But right now, Russia is still getting about $1 billion a day from the European Union in exchange for sending them gas. So, of course, and I think initially when the markets fell very sharply, when the ruble fell very sharply, people thought, wow, these sanctions are really going to bite and they're really going to hurt. And they are hurting. The Russian economy is going to shrink this year. But that main source of revenue is still coming into Russia. It's going to be coming into Russia for a long time to come. And on top of that, exactly as you said, he war-proofed his economy to some extent by building up Russia's reserves and also by ensuring very, very low levels of debt. Russia's debt to GDP ratio, Neil, is about 3%. It's 100% in this country. It's 100% or more in many Western countries. They have very, very little public debt. So his economy is actually in pretty resilient condition, even despite the sanctions.
It's interesting, too, because the ruble is almost back at pre-war levels, I guess. You follow this far more closely than I. And the markets have rebounded, not to pre-war levels, but certainly not the basement where they were. So I guess you wonder, he's still got eager and willing customers happy to buy that oil. China and India come to mind, but there are many, many others. So it sounds like he has more than enough to keep this going for a long time.
Yeah, and there's another paradox here, Neil, of course, is that oil prices have gone up sharply since the invasion. So that actually, which actually increases the value of his export. I mean, oil prices have gone up. Now they've come down from their peak, but they're still significantly higher than they were before the invasion. So that's also helping him too. One other thing I should also say, Neil, is that we impose these sanctions on financial institutions, but several key important Russian banks were left out of them. So most of those Russian banks are still connected to SWIFT, the international system. Many of the banks have not been subject to sanctions at all. So Russians who, if you remember, trying to get their money out. The central bank put up interest rates dramatically. Even that has started to ease a bit. The Russian central bank actually cut interest rates this week.
That's right. What's 17% from 20%?
Because it went from 10 to 20 after the invasion and then back down to 17. So look, it's not great to be in Russia right now economically, but it's not facing economic collapse.
Which might explain why he might have some support, that is Vladimir Putin at home. Now, Viktor Yushchenko, the former president of Ukraine, with whom I chatted, doesn't buy this 70% approval rating that Putin has in Russia. He just doesn't buy it. He says that the hurt is real in Russia. People are feeling it. They're getting frustrated. It's just a matter of time before they let that be known. But that's a big leap to toppling a leader. Yeah,
look, I think there are two things. First of all, if you're Russian and someone calls you up and asks what you think of Vladimir Putin, are you likely to say, he's terrible, I can't stand the man? Right. I mean, I think you know where that will...
10 minutes later, there's a knock at the door.
So I don't think we can trust those opinion polls. One thing we can say, though, Neil, and where I slightly disagree, is that... The news the Russians are getting is not the news that we're seeing. Right. You can see this. There's a lot of monitoring of Russian media going on. They've shut down all independent media. Every Russian media outlet is telling them that this is a war against Nazis in Ukraine, that it's a war of, it's a war against NATO, who NATO were trying to take over Ukraine and then ultimately Russia. They say that it's the Ukrainians who are committing atrocities, not the Russians. So the picture they're getting on every media, social media, traditional media, everything they're seeing is that this is a completely justified war, that it's going extremely well. By the way, they're not hearing anything about these casualties that the Russians have had. And so, of course, Russians actually are quite supportive of it. So whether or not you can believe the opinion polls, I do think it's true that you're not going to see, for some time at least, any real popular discontent, because they simply aren't being told the story of what is actually going on.
And that's a pity, because that's what Ukrainians are hanging their proverbial hats on, that right. Turn, people turn on him. Finally, Gerry, I'd like to get your sense of Vladimir Putin right now, and this idea that he's having a very difficult time, it's not only an idea, it's clear that he is having a very difficult time, and that he's getting desperate. You've heard the analogy, the wounded, cornered animal. So if there is going to be some sort of a diplomatic settlement to this, then what would be done for Vladimir Putin to make him leave?
Well, that's the question. Everybody's trying to figure out what are the terms on which this could end. I think Putin could accept probably, the recognition of the annexation of Crimea, which happened in 2014, some sort of semi-autonomous status for those for the Donbass, which is that eastern region of Ukraine, with a lot of Russian speakers and those sort of separatist republics there, or so-called autonomous regions.
But that would get. I mean, Zelensky would have to go along with it.
He would, and I think Zelensky couldn't. So, and also, one other thing, he would only also accept Ukraine agreeing to be neutral, never joining NATO. So Zelensky, I think Zelensky would have a hard time going along with that. But I suspect, unfortunately, look, we're in for a long war here. I think this is going to go on for a while, and I suspect, the pressure is going to grow on Zelensky to accept something that really isn't, because the Russians aren't going to leave.
Are we applying too much of that kind of pressure to settle for something? You've heard the the Jack Keynes and others who suspect the administration is more worried about Putin losing than winning. What do you make of it?
I think that may be true. Look, I interviewed former Defense Secretary Robert Gates for my podcast this week, and he said he thinks we're dramatically overestimating Vladimir Putin's likelihood of using nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction. He said he's not going to do that. He thinks it's extremely unlikely. So that, I think, is causing this
even if he has
caution.
no future or feels that there's no upside?
That's his view. Look, I mean, it would be an extraordinary step, I mean, to do that, even if, again, I don't think he's going to be toppled. So I don't think this isn't an existential threat for him.
Right.
So we may be dramatically overestimating that, and for that reason, being much too cautious here. And exactly as you say, and exactly as General Keynes says, we kind of are, we should really be giving the Ukrainians all the tools they can to actually win this war, because I think the consequences would be good for the rest of the world, or better.
So
for the
you're
rest
not
of
in that camp that says we might be just holding back a little bit. That's a little too black helicopter.
Cynical. I think there may be an element of that. I don't think it's deliberate. I don't think they're deliberately, wanting to see Ukrainians killed in their thousands as they're being killed. These terrible thing that happened today. I don't think they want to do that to sort of pin the Russians down. But I do think there is this nervousness that if Russia is actually pushed out and is really defeated, then he will escalate. And I think that again, that's what I think is being overestimated. I don't think he would. I don't think he would escalate. And I think we still have the potential to do an awful lot more to help the Ukrainians actually win this war.
Yeah, well, they're upping the ante and the military equipment, the heavier equipment that NATO has been promising. Exactly. Got it, my friend. Gerry Baker, you can see in Wall Street Journal at Large tonight.